Hi, Dave Jones here again. This is a lesson on how to read scale shapes. Now, this isn't a total beginner lesson because hopefully, if you can read tab and you've got a few single string things under your belt and you've learned on the low level part of the website, level 1 I think it is, there's some open scales. It's worth learning the open scales first because that means there's open strings within the scale, so they can be written out in tab. But what happens is, one of the nice things about the guitar is that you can learn scales in what's called a shape, a fingerboard shape. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn the names of the notes as well at some stage, but you can learn the main sort of, well, any scale can be learned in what's called a fingerboard shape or a scale shape. And what this does is it tells you what fingers to use as you move up the fretboard. And these shapes are what's called transpositional. So that means that you don't have to worry too much about that at the moment, but it means you can play them, once you've learned the shape, you can play them in any key as long as you're not using open strings for the scale. So the early scales are better learned, like the ones under level 1 that are called the open scales. They're better learnt from tab because they tell you exactly what frets and open strings to use. But as you become slightly more advanced and you want to be playing scales in different keys, you sometimes need to learn, the best way to learn it is from a shape because it tells you what fingers to use, and if you learn that particular fingering pattern, you can move the scale around and it becomes a different scale at each fret that you stop at, but you're replicating the same shape. That's because it's like a transpositional shape, you can move it around. I'll show you the PDF briefly, and then I'll show you how the scale shape works, and hopefully you can use that to learn any scale you want to. The scale that I've notated out in the PDF is called a major scale, but you can learn it for minor pentatonic scales, major pentatonic scales, blues scales. It's all done the same, and there are many of these scales up on the site written in this way, so once you understand it, you can go ahead and learn lots of scales. Okay, so this is the PDF that you can print off the website. This again is under the Essential Basics section. Now what we've got here is a picture of the guitar poking up in the air, a bit like you do when if you've done a few chords. There's another PDF, how to read chord diagrams. The reason this is shown as a sort of a broken thing without the nut at the top is because this scale shown here is a 2-octave A major scale. Now, these Roman numerals down the side are a standard way with the guitar of showing the fret numbers. So we've got fret 4, fret 5, fret 6 and fret 7. There's your names of the strings down the bottom, E, A, D, G, B, E, the old elephants and donkeys grow big ears. And these dots on the thing show you where to put your fingers when you're playing the scale. And the numbers next to the dots show a suggested fingering. So I'd try and keep to this finger if I was you. So the first note there is you play with your second finger, the next note you play with your fourth finger, then you can move down a string, you play that note with your first finger, second finger, that note with your fourth finger, move down a string, first finger, third finger, etc., all the way down to the bottom of the scale. The black dots show you what's called the root notes. Now, I've put a table at the bottom showing you the names of the notes at the various frets along the neck of the guitar on the thick E string. So this number 2 here, with the black dot, because it's at the 5th fret, you'll see that the 5th fret is the letter A. So that note there is the A note on your guitar if you start the 5th fret. And then you play through the scale. The red dots just tell you what other notes are in the scale. And because this is a 2-octave scale, that means you go from A to A twice. We go A, and then we go up the scale. That black dot there shows you where the next A note is. And then you carry on up the scale, and that black dot there shows you where the next A note is. So you've gone from A to A is 1 octave, A to A is the 2nd octave. So I hope you get that. What I'll do is I'll play through the scale very slowly and show you how it's played. And then once you've learnt it, it means that if you move it around, that's why I said to you about transpositional shape. If you started that whole shape, say for example, at the 3rd fret instead of the 5th fret, but replicated that fingering pattern, sorry I'm getting out of shot here, replicated that fingering pattern, you would have, because that note at the 3rd fret is a G, you would have a G major scale. So without learning a new shape, you can actually play the major scale over 2 octaves in all 12 keys which are shown at the bottom here from the thick E string, first fret, second fret, third fret, etc., all the way along. Just a quick thing to be note, that F sharp and that little hash signs are sharp and the little B signs are flat. F sharp and G flat are the same note as each other. I'll be going into more of that sort of theory stuff later on. So what I'll do is I'll show you the shape close up. I'll play it on the guitar for you, and I'll show you so you can follow the fingering. Okay, so here we are with a close up. Now, if you're following that PDF, this is my 5th fret here. So what I'm doing, as in the PDF, this is my A note at the 5th fret, and then I play that note, and you'll see the next note is played with the 4th finger at the 7th fret. Then we move down a string onto the A string, and we play the 4th fret with the 1st finger, the 5th fret with the 2nd finger, the 7th fret with the 4th finger. We move down to the next string, 4th fret with the 1st finger, 6th fret with the 3rd finger, 7th fret with the 4th finger, move down a string, 1st finger at the 4th fret, 3rd finger at the 6th fret, little finger or 4th finger at the 7th fret, move down a string, and we get the 2nd finger this time at the 5th fret, 4th finger at the 7th fret, move down a string, and we get the 1st finger at the 4th fret, and finally the 2nd finger at the 5th fret. So hopefully you got that, and you're following it from the tab, from the scale diagram, and hopefully you should understand that now. I'll just show you a long shot and talk a little bit more about it. Okay, so in my humble opinion, that is the best way to learn a scale shape, because like I said to you, the root notes down the bottom, that's a movable shape. Tab would tell you what fret numbers to play at, but it wouldn't tell you what fingers to use. And if you're going to, the whole point of learning these scales is eventually to use them for things like improvisations and playing melodies. And if you're always using the same fingers, then you learn the scale a lot quicker. It falls under your fingers better. You notice that we're not moving our hand there at all. Well, we're moving our fingers, but we're not actually moving our hand flying around all over the fretboard. It's staying in a fixed position, which means that all the notes are accessible once you've got used to it. All the notes in that scale are accessible without moving your hand around. Now, scales, just a word on practice. Scales should be practiced slowly and evenly and with clear notes. They shouldn't be attempted fast until you really, really know them well and can play them slowly without making any mistakes. The other way to practice, it's quite important to practice scale, is play up to the top note. So from this note here to this note here, via the fingering position that I've shown you, and back down again without repeating the top note. Two reasons for that. One is obviously you need to be able to come back down the scale. It's slightly more difficult if you're a beginner to come back down the scale than it is to go up, but you need to be able to go in both directions. And the other thing is you get the sound of, you're playing from a root note, in this case from an A note to another A note, so you get the sound of the scale over a period of time. You get the sound of that major scale, or if it was a minor pentatonic scale, in your head, rather than playing to a note that's going into the next octave, because that note's in the scale if it's on that string. You can use it in an improvisation, but don't practice the scale like that. Practice it from the root note, etc., to the root note and back down again. And like I say, if you just move that shape, because as I said to you, there's a table at the bottom that tells you the names of the notes. If I played that scale there, that's the 3rd fret. If you look at the table, it will tell you that's a G note. Without learning a new shape, I'm now playing a G major scale. So I hope you found that useful. There are many shapes up on the website. Once you've learned the idea of how to read them, I'd start off with, in the scales section, there's one called Essential Scales, which takes you through the basic scales, the major scale, the natural minor scale, the minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, and blues scale. They're the basic mainstay of most sort of improvisations, certainly at the more basic level of improvising. Knowing one shape of each of those and start using them for soloing is more important than knowing loads and loads of shapes and not know how to use them. So I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you again sometime.